Welcome to Camera Basics. We're going to take a look at a few of the basic operations on the camera, but also some very important settings that everyone wants to get set right from the very beginning. In here, we'll take a look at what type of camera we're using, the sensor size, a few of the primary controls, and then we're going to get the file format set correctly for what you want to do with those files. All right, let's start off with the fact that this is a mirrorless camera. This is the standard in the industry now. We've got interchangeable lenses. Each of the lenses has an aperture unit, which can control the light coming into the camera itself. As light comes in towards the sensor, well, it needs to get past the shutter unit first. Now, normally the shutter unit is in the open position. That way, light can travel back to the sensor, and you can see on the back LCD monitor or in the EVF and compose your shot. Now, when it comes time to actually press down on the shutter release and take a photo, well, the shutter goes through a lot of movements in here. Let me show you from the side as well as the front. What happens is one of the shutters will close so that the sensor can prepare to capture light. That's when your image is exposed to the sensor, and then the second shutter comes in and turns off the exposure, and then it returns to its open position so that you can see once again through the monitor or the LCD what's going on. So there's a lot of operations going on in there. Now, that's not the way the camera always works. That's one of the ways that the camera can work, and this depends a little bit on what shutter type you have chosen. This is something that we're going to talk more about in the capture controls, and there is a number of very interesting things going on in here, and we're going to save that discussion for then. But this is kind of the standard way that the camera will work. And those are the most important components in a mirrorless camera like this Z5 Mark II. Now, one of the most important parts of any camera is the imaging sensor. And this camera uses a fairly large imaging sensor. It's much larger than many of the other cameras out on the market, and we're not going to be going into all of those. This is using what is known as a full frame sensor. This is based off of 35mm film, which was one of the most popular options for, well, many decades. There was nothing perfect about it. It was just kind of a nice Goldilocks in between size. And so full frame cameras are still very popular today, and there's a wide variety of them available. There are also many smaller size cameras with smaller size sensors. Smaller sensor usually means less cost because the sensor is not as expensive, but it also means the lenses and cameras can be a little bit smaller. So lots of compromises in there, but this has been a favorite of many photographers. All right, let's talk about some of the basic controls on the camera. When you turn the camera on and off, the camera goes through an image sensor cleaning mode where it tries to knock dust off the sensor. Dust on the sensor will show up as black spots on your pictures and is not good at all. So the camera does a reasonably good job of keeping that dust off. You do want to be careful, though, about changing lenses in a dusty or dirty environment because dust on the sensor will be a problem and you'll need to deal with that in post-production, cleaning those off. Shutter release is something you'll be using to take your photos. There are two main dials on the camera. The main command dial is on the back and the sub-command dial is on the front. We'll be using these to change shutter speeds, apertures, and a whole lot of other features. On the back of the camera is a photo video switch, and this really changes the way that the camera works. And so it can be somewhat easy to bump in some cases as it goes in and out of a camera bag. And so make sure that this is in the correct position for what you want to do, because you don't shoot videos when you're in the photo mode and you don't shoot photos when you're in the video mode. And so a very clear distinction about what you're doing there. The multi-selector on the back is a great way for navigating throughout the menu system. When you need to go up, down, left, right, this can be used in the menu, or when moving the focusing point around, there might be some other instances where you can use it as well. There is an OK button in the middle. This is your confirmation button when you want to make a setting adjustment change. So you'll highlight a particular feature and then hit the OK button. You can also use the sub-selector. This is going to be used for moving the focusing point around. That's kind of its main job. But it can also be used in the playback menu, the regular menu, and a variety of other functions on the camera as well. It is also a button that you press in on. And so not only is it a directional joystick, but it's also a button. And finally, you can also use the touchscreen control as well. And this can be used for taking photos, moving the focusing point around, navigating the menu system. Some people like this. You can turn it on. Some people don't like it. This feature can be turned off so that it doesn't get activated when your nose accidentally presses it or something else when you're holding it up to your eye. And so those are our main controls that we're going to be using throughout the remainder of this class. Now there's a few buttons on the camera that are kind of safety protocol buttons, which means that you have to press the button down and hold it down while you turn a dial to change that particular feature. There are other buttons on the camera that don't do this. You press the button down and the feature is active for a while and you can make an adjustment or not. There are other buttons that when you press down, it automatically activates whatever it does in particular. But a few of those buttons you need to hold down as you press, and you just get a little different on those particular buttons. Now, if you don't like this, you can go into the custom settings menu and you can go to F7 release button to use dial, and you can turn off this little safety protocol so it doesn't work in that style. So we'll talk more about that in the menu system itself. But once again, as you will see throughout this class, there are lots of ways to customize the buttons and other controls to your preferred preferences. All right, the shutter release button is a two-stage device. When you press halfway down, it's going to awaken the camera if it happens to be asleep. It's going to start the metering system, which will typically last for 8 seconds, but is adjustable. It's going to activate the autofocus system, but if you don't like that, you can turn that off. And it's going to return it to the shooting mode if you happen to be in the menu system. So if you're somehow kind of lost in the menu and you just want to take a photo and you want to get out, just press halfway down on the shutter release. It's your emergency escape to get back into your shooting mode there. So just be aware that there's a lot of things going on with that half press. So you want to become very familiar with that on the camera. Pressing down all the way, of course, will release the shutter and take the picture for you. Now, if you don't like the autofocus that is going on when you press halfway down and you want to put the camera into what's known as a back button autofocusing system, you can turn off the AF activation that is attributed with that shutter release button. And you can dive into the custom setting menu under AF activation and you can turn that off if you want to. We'll talk more about this in the focusing section and I'll do a demo and show you how to set it up. But if you want to jump ahead real quick, that's where you do it. All right, getting into some important stuff. The file format. When you shoot a digital picture, it is stored in a digital file, and that's going to determine what you're going to be able to do with that file down the road. Now, the best option, in my opinion, for most people in most situations is going to be a raw file. This is the original information from the sensor. It's going to give you the greatest latitude of adjustments later on, especially when it comes to exposure. If your picture's a little too light, a little too dark, with a raw file, you can make those adjustments and get it exactly to your likings later on. Now, the more common format that is being used is JPEG. This is the type of files that are usually shared online. If you're going to be looking at an image on a screen of some sort, it's probably going to be a JPEG image. And so these are very, very versatile formats. Typically, I shoot everything in RAW. I'll work with it a little bit, and then I will export a JPEG. And that might be a slide or a picture I show in my class, or an image I share online, or a picture I email to somebody. That's probably going to be a JPEG image. Kind of the new fancy version of JPEGs are known as HIF images, H-I-F. And these are technically better images than JPEGs. They contain more information. The problem is that it's kind of the new kid on the block, and not all the programs work with HIF images as well as they do work with JPEG images. And so before you switch over to HIF, you want to make sure that it works right for what you are doing. There are some other limitations too. So if you are looking for a compressed option to the RAW, it's probably going to be JPEG. You're going to want to make really sure if HIF is right for you. So as you get into the image quality settings, as I say, RAW image is very popular amongst a lot of photographers because it gets you the best information possible recorded in the camera. This is going to get you the 24 megapixels, the maximum resolution. The file size is a little bit larger. Downside is also that it is a proprietary format, which means you either need to use Nikon software or other software from other manufacturers that have decoded it, understand how it works. For instance, Adobe does this very well, as well as many other companies. and they have programs that work with Nikon's RAW files. Now, when it comes to JPEG files, they have fine, normal, and basic, which are different compression levels. And actually, each of those options is broken into kind of basic and slightly better ones. The better quality ones have the little asterisk beside the name. But all of these are JPEGs. They're all compression options where it takes the full resolution of the camera. You keep the full resolution, but it reduces that file in a number of ways to have a smaller file size. Now, obviously, if you didn't want to shoot RAW, you probably want to shoot with the highest quality JPEG that you want or need. In some cases, some people don't need a super high quality JPEG and they want to reduce the size so that they have smaller file sizes to deal with. So there are lower quality options in there as well. Now, a third option to shooting RAW or JPEG is being able to shoot RAW and JPEG at the same time. And so in this case, I usually save these for special scenarios where you know you want the RAW, but maybe somebody else needs the JPEG. Or there's two different purposes and you don't want to take the time to download all your RAWs, create JPEG copies. This allows you to create it straight in camera. The downside to this is that it's going to take up more space. You're shooting 2 files for every time you take one single photograph. It might clutter and confuse things up if you don't need this as well. And so I leave this for special scenarios where you know you need RAW, but you also want JPEG and you want them straight out of camera or you want them very quickly. You can choose between JPEG and HEIF. Those are the options. As we saw in the previous slide, I mentioned JPEG, but you could substitute and you could put HEIF in there if you want to. And so choosing between JPEG and HEIF is done someplace else. That is done under the tone mode option in the photo shooting menu. And you choose SDR for standard dynamic range or HLG, which is a hybrid log gamma. And the difference between these is one is an 8-bit and one is a 10-bit, which means that you are getting more colors. Now, it would be pretty obvious that the more colors you have, the more accurate your picture is going to be. And that is without a doubt absolutely true. The problem is that most of the monitors that we use and phones and computer monitors that we use or programs, websites that we go to are only going to show us images in 8-bit. And so while 10-bit has more, it's not going to make any effective difference for most people in most situations. If you were going to print an image and you were going to use a printer that used a lot of different colors, then yeah, that would make a difference. If you're going to edit your images, yeah, that would give you a bit more to work with in that particular case. And so that's the technical difference between the JPEG and the HEIF image. It's there. It's just that it doesn't really become super effective for most people in all situations. Now, the other thing about the HEIF images is that there is limited compatibility with other things going on the camera. It's also going to limit your ISO range and limit other features that you can get to and work with on the camera. So let's do one big demo. I'm going to show you how to set up the file types, and then we'll take a look at some of those tone mode options on your camera. So we're going to go ahead and dive into the menu system here. And we are in the camera or photo shooting menu over on the left-hand side up at the top. It's the little green icon. And if we come down, let's first set up the image quality. So this is one of the things that irritates me from Nikon is the default setting. Remember, I reset my camera back to the default settings. It is a normal JPEG, which is kind of like an average quality JPEG. It's not even a good quality JPEG. If you wanted to shoot JPEG because you didn't have the right software for RAW or it was too large a file, I would choose the JPEG fine with the asterisk. That's going to get you the highest quality JPEG, give you the most versatility to work with. But I'm going to select RAW because I want the highest quality options available in the camera. I think that's going to be best for most people. As long as you have the software to work with things afterwards, this is going to be a great option. But on second thought, I'm going to set it currently up to shoot RAW plus JPEG right now because there's some JPEG options I want to be able to show you in the camera. All right, the second thing that we talked about was the tone mode, which is right up here. It's set to standard dynamic range, which is JPEG images. HLG is where we go to a HEIF image. Now, one thing I want to show you before I make this changeover And my camera, I'm going to change it over from the auto mode to the program mode just so that we're got a little bit more control over things. I'm going to press the display button on the back of the camera a couple of times so we can see a little bit about what's going on. So currently I have the camera set to 100 ISO. We'll deal with this more in the exposure section, but just want to let you know, right now I have it set to ISO 100. All right, I'm going to go in here to the tone mode and I'm going to change it to HLG. This is 10-bit information. It's better, all right? So I'm going to press the OK button. And the first thing I want to show you in the menu system is that as we scroll down, there's a number of things that are grayed out. See all those things that are grayed out? Those don't apply to HLG or HEIF images. And when I said limited compatibility, there's some things that you're just not going to be able to change in there. And so that's one of the things that's going on when you change that tone mode. Coming back to our shooting window, you'll notice that the ISO there on the bottom of the screen has now bumped up to 400. I just had it set at 100. The camera went in and automatically changed to 400 because the ISO is limited. Now it says 100 when I press this down, but as I turn the dial, I can't get it back to 100. I don't know why it said 100, maybe just to let me know where it used to be, but I'm at 400. I can go up from there, but I can't get it back down to 100 unless I come into the tone mode, change it back to SDR, which is JPEG images, and it's at 400, but now I can go back down to 100. And so that's just part of my warning about the HEIF images. It technically looks like it's very good. There's some advantages in some special situations, but I think that's going to be more on an individual basis, and you're going to need to kind of figure out with other things you're doing with the camera and the files as to whether that is right for you. But it does have that capability built in, and if you want to use it, well, you can certainly use it, and that's how you do it. We also have image size settings, and this has to do with the number of pixels that we are recording, and this is only going to apply when you shoot JPEG images. When you shoot RAW, you're going to get the full resolution, you're going to get everything as good as it can be. But with JPEGs, you can scale down and shoot smaller sizes if you want. And so under image size settings, under image size, you can go in and change it from 24 megapixels down to 13 or 6. Why would you want less pixels? Well, you want a smaller file size that's more appropriate to what you're actually going to do with it. 24 megapixels, in my opinion, is still a lot of megapixels. It's more than you need for a lot of things. And if you don't have a computer, you don't want to waste the time going in and sizing something down, you can create the exact size JPEG that you need or something that is closer to what you need right here. This can also be very handy if you're shooting RAW plus JPEG. RAW, you get full resolution, everything as good as it can be, but with JPEG, maybe you get a smaller JPEG that you can transfer more easily because it's some smaller file size, or it's just easier to work with in other ways. So good options, but most of the time I would leave it at the full resolution, 24 megapixels in there. All right, that covers you on your basics. You've got your file type set up, and now you're ready for the remainder of this class. And we'll see you in those next sections.